Hi again, Danny Ceballos with Unleashed Consulting and the Best Boss Bootcamp, completing this series of short videos for you on leading and managing change. So you remember at the end of our last time together, we talked about this notion of how we can think of change, whether it's positive or negative, as essentially going through three states with a big dip in the middle here. And those three states are endings, the ending of the current state, and then something Bridges calls the neutral zone or the middle state, where we're doing all that internal work and all that internal fighting and crisis, trying to make sense of the world. Bridges calls that the neutral state. And then finally, the third state is the beginning state, where we engage with the change, whether it's positive or negative, and hopefully to the extent that we're constructive and that we're optimistic and that we're masterful in that place. But recognizing, again, if you remember the very first video where I showed you how change can look in terms of a car going on a road and going through a dark cloud, and that's crazy. That's what this dip is here in this middle section, the Bridges neutral zone or ambiguity stage. So you can always expect that with change, and you can empower the folks that you supervise with that knowledge to expect that it will be gray, but to keep hanging on to what we know is the destination, to keep moving forward in that. So I'm going to help you with that and tell you a few ways that you might think about how to bring people aboard with you as you're going through change. So the first thing, I love this, is the change equation. I'm not sure where to cite this or source it. I've been using it for many, many years. So if you know where it comes from, please let me know so I can give credit where credit is due. But it basically says that there are four things to think about when people are going through change, period. So it's the dissatisfaction with the present conditions versus the desirability of the change, how much do I want it, versus the practicality of a change, so what am I going to get from this, and then lastly, the X factor, or the cost of the change. And basically what this says is that the dissatisfaction and the desirability and the practicality, all of those together in sum, have to be greater than the cost of the change. So if you're starting to work through change for yourself, for the people that you supervise, for your organization, your team, think about these four different components. And maybe before you execute or launch the change, you need to make sure that your A, B, and D, that your dissatisfaction, your desirability, and your practicality are as much as possible raised to the highest level. So what do you need to do in order to do that, so that it overwhelms or that it's greater than what I perceive or what your folks perceive as the cost of change? Also to think about as you're thinking about how to bring people on board with the change and how it will ultimately be in their best interest, is to think about it in terms of the general population falls into their ability to work with change and to appreciate change. And so we call the first group of people the early adopters. So those are folks, the first folks to wait in line and to sign up for the new iPhone when it's released. They usually come on board very, very early as the change begins. The second are the pragmatists. And those are the folks that are waiting for the proof in the pudding. So waiting for the early adopters to report back, yep, this thing works, the bugs have been worked out, I am going to now buy an iPhone. The third level of folks are those are the folks that are really going to wait it out, and if they had their druthers, they would stay with how things are, and those are the conservatives. And then lastly, we have folks that are really waiting towards the end. If they come on board at all, those are the laggards. So I want to ask you, first of all, which one of these folks do you think you are generally with change? And it really has to do with personality profiling and what we value and what our core needs are. So for instance, I'm an early adopter. I like going forward with change. I'm really good with change. I don't always buy the first version of the iPhone, but it always looks sexy to me, and it's always something I want to bring into my life. But where are you? And I want to show you where how kind of the population breaks out. So it kind of looks like this bell chart. It says that, first of all, the early adopters are at the tail end, a small percentage. The pragmatists and the conservatives take up the bulk of what it is in terms of the population and their intersection with change efforts. And then lastly, it's the laggards, the tail end. So when you're working with your folks, who do you think you concentrate on in order to bring people on board with the change? Do you think you work with the early adopters, the pragmatists, the conservatives, or the laggards? You don't want to work with the laggards. There's no reason. If people are resisting and you want them to come on board, let them be. If they're really resistant, let them be, because no matter what you do, you're not going to bring them on board. Those are the laggards. Instead, you want to concentrate on leveraging the early adopters and the pragmatists, especially once the pragmatists come on board. They can be your best ambassadors for bringing change to the forefront and actually making it effective. So we're going to stop there, and I have one more video to share with you after this, and we'll finish up how to best bring your folks and lead people through change. Again, my name is Danny Ceballos. I'm with Unleashed Consulting and the Best Boss Bootcamp, and I hope to see you around real soon. Thanks for joining me.